At my grandfather's funeral, the lawyer pointed at me. Everyone went silent. My grandfather's funeral was supposed to be the day we buried the past. Instead, it became the day the past stood up from the grave, pointed its finger at everyone who had lied, and chose me. The church was full that morning. Not because my grandfather was loved by everyone. No. It was full because everyone wanted to see what would happen next. In our town, the Harrington family name carried weight. My grandfather, Arthur Harrington, had built half the businesses on Main Street. He owned land, factories, old houses, warehouses, and investments nobody in the family fully understood. To outsiders, he was a powerful man. To my family, he was something different. He was the man they feared. And to me, he was the only person who ever made me feel like I mattered. My name is Clara Harrington. And until that funeral, everyone in my family believed I was the weakest person in the room. They were wrong. I sat in the last pew of the church, even though I was his granddaughter. My mother had told me the front rows were for real family. That was her exact phrase. Real family. As if I was some stranger who had wandered in from the rain. My Aunt Patricia sat in the first row, dressed in black silk and fake grief. Her pearls shone brighter than her tears. Beside her was my Uncle Martin, checking his watch every few minutes like grief was an appointment that had already run too long. My cousin sat behind them. Victoria, beautiful and cold. Ethan, smug and bored. And my mother, Denise, sat with her back straight, her face calm, her eyes dry. She had not cried once. Not when the doctor called. Not when the body was brought home. Not when they closed the coffin. But I had cried. I had cried until my chest hurt. Because the man lying in that coffin had once sat beside me on the porch during thunderstorms and told me that lightning was only the sky taking pictures. He had taught me how to plant roses. How to read old maps. How to make tea the proper way. And how to stand still when the world tried to push me down. The pastor stood at the pulpit and spoke of legacy, honor, generosity, and family. I almost laughed at the word family. Because if there was one thing the Harringtons knew how to destroy, it was family. My father died when I was 8. After that, my mother brought me back to her side of the family, to the Harrington estate, where I learned very quickly that blood did not mean love. Aunt Patricia said I looked too much like my father. Uncle Martin said my father had been a nobody who got lucky by marrying in. My cousins treated me like a servant who happened to eat at the same table. And my mother. My mother never defended me. She was too busy trying to regain her place in the family after marrying a man they all considered beneath her. So she let them laugh. She let them exclude me. She let them turn me into the quiet girl in the corner. But my grandfather never did. He saw everything. He saw Patricia assign me chores during holiday dinners while my cousins opened gifts. He saw Martin forget to include me in family photos. He saw Victoria ruin my dress before my graduation party and smile while I walked into the room with a stain across my skirt. He saw my mother look away. And every time, my grandfather would call me to his study afterward. Clara, he would say, people show you who they are when they think you have no power. I would wipe my tears and ask, what am I supposed to do? And he would smile sadly. Remember. That was all. Remember. For years, I thought he meant remember the pain. But I was wrong. He meant remember the truth. The funeral service ended with a hymn. Everyone stood. I stayed seated for a second longer, looking at the coffin, unable to accept that he was really gone. Then I felt a shadow fall over me. It was Victoria. She looked down at me with the same expression she used when looking at something stuck to her shoe. You should come to the house after this, she said. I blinked, surprised. Really? She smiled. Not kindly. Of course. The will is being read. Grandfather left a few sentimental things. Maybe you'll get one of his old books. Behind her, Ethan laughed under his breath. My face burned. I didn't come for anything, I said. Victoria leaned closer. That's good. Because nobody expects you to get anything. Then she walked away. I wanted to disappear. But then I remembered my grandfather's voice. Stand still when the world tries to push you down. So I stood. At the cemetery, the wind was cold. Grey clouds covered the sky, and the trees around the gravesite bent, as if they too were grieving. One by one, people placed white roses on the coffin. When it was my turn, I held my rose so tightly the thorns cut into my palm. I whispered, I don't know how to do this without you. For a moment, I imagined he answered. You already know how. After the burial, everyone moved toward their cars. I was about to leave quietly when an older man in a dark suit approached me. He had silver hair, sharp eyes, and a leather briefcase in his hand. Miss Clara Harrington. Yes? My name is Richard Bell. I was your grandfather's attorney. I had seen him once or twice at the estate, always leaving my grandfather's study with serious eyes. He looked at me carefully. Your grandfather asked that you attend the reading of the will. I swallowed. My family said I could come. Mr. Bell's expression did not change, but something in his eyes hardened. Your presence is not optional. It was his explicit instruction. Behind him, Aunt Patricia was watching us. So was my mother. Their faces had changed. For the first time that day, they looked nervous. The Harrington estate stood on a hill above town, a massive stone house with ivy crawling up its walls like it was trying to pull the whole building into the earth. I had grown up inside that house and never felt at home in it. The foyer smelled like Polish, old wood, and secrets. Everyone gathered in the formal sitting room. The same room where, as a child, I was once told not to touch the piano because it was for family guests, not children like me. I sat near the back again. Aunt Patricia noticed and smiled. Clara, dear, there's no need to look so frightened. This won't take long. Uncle Martin poured himself a drink. The main properties should be straightforward, he said. Father and I discussed the business many times. Mr. Bell placed his briefcase on the table. Mr. Harrington made several changes to his estate plan in the last year. The room went quiet. Martin stopped pouring. Patricia sat straighter. My mother's eyes moved quickly to the lawyer. What changes? Patricia asked. Mr. Bell ignored the question and removed a thick folder from his briefcase. Before we begin, Mr. Harrington requested that I read a letter aloud. A letter? Ethan said. Seriously? Mr. Bell looked at him. Yes. Seriously. He unfolded a paper. The room became so still I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. Mr. Bell began to read. To my family, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. I imagine some of you are grieving. I imagine some of you are pretending. And I imagine some of you are already counting what you believe belongs to you. Aunt Patricia gasped softly. Martin's face darkened. Mr. Bell continued. I was not blind. I was old, but I was not foolish. I watched all of you. I watched how you treated one another. I watched how you treated the one person among you who asked for nothing and gave everything. My heart started pounding. Victoria shifted in her seat. I built wealth in my life. But wealth is dangerous in the hands of people who have no character. It does not create greatness. It reveals greed. Martin slammed his glass down. This is ridiculous. Mr. Bell paused. Would you like me to continue, Mr. Harrington? Martin said nothing. The lawyer looked back at the letter. There is one person in this room who visited me when I was ill without checking the clock. One person who read to me when my hands could no longer hold a book. One person who brought me soup when the nurses said I would not eat. One person who remembered my birthday without being reminded by an assistant. One person who never asked me what she would inherit. My throat tightened. No. He couldn't mean me. He couldn't. Mr. Bell's voice softened. That person is Clara. Everyone turned. Every head in that room turned toward me. My mother's face went pale. Victoria's mouth opened slightly. Ethan looked like someone had slapped him. And then Mr. Bell did the thing I would never forget. He lifted his hand and pointed at me. Arthur Harrington named Clara Harrington as the primary beneficiary of his estate. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that feels like the air has been stolen. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then Aunt Patricia laughed. A sharp, ugly laugh. No. That's not possible. Mr. Bell placed the letter down. It is possible. It is legal. And it is final. Martin stood. Primary beneficiary. What does that mean? It means, said Mr. Bell, Miss Clara Harrington inherits the Harrington estate, including this residence, the family trust majority interest, the private land holdings, and controlling shares in Harrington Holdings. Ethan shot to his feet. What? Victoria looked at me with pure hatred. This is a joke. My mother whispered, Clara. I could not speak. My hands were shaking. I looked around the room at the people who had spent years reminding me I was nothing. Now they were staring at me as if I had stolen the sun. Mr. Bell continued. There are additional conditions and individual bequests. Patricia's voice shook. Conditions? Yes, he said. Mr. Harrington also left personal letters for each of you. But the main terms are clear. Martin pointed at me. She manipulated him. The words hit me like a stone. I didn't, I said quietly. Victoria stepped toward me. You expect us to believe grandfather left everything to you. You barely belong in this family. Before I could answer, Mr. Bell's voice cut through the room. Miss Victoria, your grandfather anticipated that accusation. He removed another envelope. In fact, he anticipated many things. He opened it. To those who will accuse Clara of manipulation, I had my mind evaluated 3 times in the last year. The reports are included. I changed my will in private, without Clara's knowledge. If you attack her, you prove exactly why I made this decision. Patricia's face twisted. This is cruel. Mr. Bell looked at her. No, Mrs. Whitmore. From what I understand, cruelty is not new in this family. Only the consequences are. I stared at the floor. I wanted my grandfather back. Not the estate. Not the money. Not the power. Just him. But the room around me was exploding. Martin shouted about lawsuits. Patricia cried about betrayal. Ethan cursed under his breath. Victoria stared at me like she was already planning revenge. And my mother sat frozen. Not angry. Not relieved. Frozen. As if the daughter she ignored had suddenly become someone she did not recognize. Mr. Bell raised his hand. There is one more instruction. Everyone stopped. Mr. Harrington requested that Miss Clara be given immediate access to his private study. No one else is permitted inside until she has reviewed its contents. Martin's eyes narrowed. What contents? Mr. Bell turned to me. Miss Harrington, your grandfather left you a key. He handed me a small brass key tied with a blue ribbon. The moment it touched my palm, I remembered. That ribbon. It had once been tied around a box of watercolor pencils he gave me when I was 10. He had saved it. I closed my fingers around it and stood. I want to go to the study. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. Mr. Bell nodded. I'll accompany you. But before we could leave, my mother stood. Clara, wait. I looked at her. 4 years, I had waited for my mother to say something. To defend me. To choose me. To love me out loud. Now she looked at me with trembling lips. Please, she said. We should talk. A strange calm came over me. Now you want to talk. Her eyes filled with tears. Don't do this. I almost laughed. Do what? Turn against your family. The words opened something inside me. A wound that had never healed. My family turned against me first. She flinched. I walked out before she could answer. The hallway to my grandfather's study felt longer than I remembered. Portraits of dead Harringtons lined the walls, their painted eyes following me like judges. When we reached the heavy oak door, Mr. Bell stepped back. This room is yours now. I put the key into the lock. For a second, I couldn't turn it. My hand was shaking too much. Then I breathed in, turned the key, and opened the door. The study smelled like leather, dust, pipe tobacco, and my grandfather's old cologne. Books lined every wall. His desk sat near the window, exactly as he had left it. A pair of reading glasses. A fountain pen. A half-finished crossword. For a moment, the grief hit me so hard I had to hold the back of a chair. Mr. Bell waited quietly. On the desk was a wooden box. My name was carved into the lid. Clara. I touched the letters. Inside was another letter, a stack of journals, a small velvet pouch, and a photograph. The photograph showed my grandfather standing beside my father. My father. I had almost no photos of him. In this one, he was young, smiling, his arm around my grandfather's shoulder. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, were the words, "The son I should have protected." My breath caught. Mr. Bell, I whispered, what is this? The lawyer's face softened. I believe your grandfather wanted you to learn the whole truth. I opened the letter. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then I have failed in one final way. I am not there to explain it myself. There are things I should have told you years ago. Things about your father. Things about this family. Things about why they treated you the way they did. Your father was not a nobody. He was not a gold digger. He was not a mistake. Your father saved this family. I stopped breathing. Saved this family. I kept reading. When my business nearly collapsed, it was your father who found the accounting fraud. It was your father who discovered that Martin had been moving money through false vendor accounts. It was your father who came to me with proof, even though he knew exposing Martin would tear your mother's family apart. My knees weakened. Uncle Martin. My father had known. I read faster. I confronted Martin privately. He begged me not to go to the police. Patricia begged me to. Denise cried and said scandal would ruin us. Your father advised me to do what was right. I did not. I chose the family name over justice. And because I was a coward, your father paid the price. The room blurred. What does that mean? I whispered. Mr. Bell did not answer. The letter did. After the confrontation, your father became a threat. Not because he wanted money, but because he had integrity. Martin and Patricia began a campaign to destroy him. They called him greedy. They said he married Denise for money. They convinced half the family he was unstable. And when he died in that accident, I accepted the official story because accepting anything else would have destroyed me. My hands went cold. My father died in a car accident. That was what I had always been told. A rainy night. A sharp turn. A truck. A tragedy. But my grandfather's words made the past shift beneath my feet. Years later, I discovered records that suggested the accident may not have been an accident. I could not prove everything. But I found enough to know I had betrayed your father twice, first by silencing him, and second by allowing his daughter to be punished for his honesty. A sound left my throat. Not a cry. Not a word. Something broken. Mr. Bell stepped closer. Miss Harrington. I held up my hand. I needed to finish. I left you this estate not because you are blood. Blood alone means nothing. I left it to you because you carry your father's heart and your grandmother's courage. You were kind when you had every reason to become cruel. But kindness without strength becomes suffering. So I am giving you strength. In the journals, you will find records. Names. Dates. Accounts. Letters. Everything I gathered. Do not seek revenge blindly. Seek truth. And when they try to make you feel small, remember this: you were never the unwanted child. You were the heir I was too ashamed to recognize. With all my love, Grandfather, I folded the letter with shaking hands. For years, I had believed my family hated me because I was inconvenient. Because my father was poor. Because my mother regretted me. But the truth was worse. They hated me because I reminded them of a man they had wronged. A man they may have destroyed. And my grandfather had known. Loved me, yes. Protected me sometimes, yes. But he had also remained silent. I wanted to be angry at him. Part of me was. But grief is complicated when the dead leave you both love and pain. I opened the velvet pouch. Inside was a ring. Not flashy. A simple gold signet ring with the Harrington crest. There was a note with it. This belonged to your grandmother. She wanted it to go to the bravest woman in the family. I should have given it to you sooner. I put the ring on. It fit. As if it had been waiting. Mr. Bell cleared his throat gently. There is something else you should know. I looked up. What? Your grandfather instructed me to give you full legal support if any member of the family challenges the will or threatens you. He expected resistance. I laughed bitterly. He knew them well. Yes, Mr. Bell said. But I believe he knew you better. When I returned to the sitting room, everyone stopped talking. I could feel the shift immediately. Before, they had looked at me with shock. Now they looked at me with calculation. Martin approached first. His anger had disappeared, replaced by a smile that made my skin crawl. Clara, he said, we all got emotional. Funerals do that. Let's sit down and discuss this like family. I looked at him. Family. That word again. Did you steal from grandfather's company? I asked. His smile froze. The room went still. Patricia stood. What did you just say? I looked at her. Did you help cover it up? My mother whispered, Clara, stop. I turned to her. Did you know? Her face crumpled. That was all the answer I needed. The room erupted again. Martin shouted that I was insane. Patricia called me ungrateful. Victoria said I was using grief for attention. But I wasn't listening anymore. For the first time in my life, I saw them clearly. Not as giants. Not as judges. Not as people whose approval I needed to survive. Just people. Frightened people. Guilty people. People who had spent years building a house of lies, and were now terrified that I had found the match. Mr. Bell stepped beside me. Ms. Harrington is now the legal owner of this residence. If she asks anyone to leave, they must leave. Patricia's mouth fell open. This is our family home. I looked around the room. The portraits. The polished tables. The piano I had never been allowed to touch. Then I looked at Patricia. No, I said. It was grandfather's home. Now it's mine. Ethan laughed harshly. You don't even know how to run it. You're right, I said. That surprised him. I don't know everything. But I know how to learn. And I know enough not to trust any of you. Victoria stepped forward. You think money makes you powerful? No, I said. Truth does. Her expression changed. Just for a second. Fear. There it was. Small, but real. I turned to Mr. Bell. I want everyone out of the house today, except my mother. My mother looked up sharply. Patricia screamed. Martin threatened legal action. Ethan called me names I will not repeat. Victoria stormed out, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. One by one, they left. For the first time in my memory, the Harrington house became quiet. When the front door closed behind the last of them, my mother and I stood alone in the sitting room. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Clara, she said, I can explain. I sat down. Then explain. She pressed her hands together. Your father, he didn't understand families like ours. He thought everything was black and white. Right and wrong. It is, I said. She shook her head, tears falling now. No, it isn't. Not when there are businesses, employees, reputations, not when there are criminals. I asked. She flinched. I was young. You were my mother. She covered her mouth. That sentence broke something in her. Maybe guilt. Maybe shame. Maybe only the fear of losing what little connection we had left. I loved your father, she whispered. I wanted to believe her. Part of me still did. Then why didn't you defend him? She looked toward the window. Because I was afraid. Of grandfather. Of all of them. Of losing everything. Of being cut off. Of becoming ordinary. Ordinary. My father had been called ordinary like it was an insult. I thought about all the nights I ate dinner alone while my cousins went to restaurants. All the birthdays forgotten. All the times my mother told me to be patient, to be polite, to not make trouble. You chose comfort over us, I said. She cried harder. I know. I expected her to deny it. To defend herself. To twist the truth. But she didn't. And somehow, that made it hurt more. Did Uncle Martin kill my father? Her face went white. I don't know. Do you suspect? She closed her eyes. A long silence passed. Yes. The word was barely audible. But I heard it. My whole life changed with that one word. Yes. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the driveway was empty. The sky had darkened. Rain tapped lightly against the glass. My grandfather used to say rain was the sky washing old sins into the ground. But some sins do not wash away. Some must be dug up. The next weeks were chaos. My family did exactly what my grandfather expected. They challenged the will. They told people I had manipulated an old man. They said I was unstable. They said grief had made me greedy. Victoria posted vague messages online about betrayal. Ethan told anyone who would listen that I had stolen the family fortune. Aunt Patricia cried in public and called herself homeless, despite owning 3 properties in her husband's name. Uncle Martin hired an aggressive lawyer. But my grandfather had prepared for war. Medical evaluations confirmed he had been fully competent. Video recordings showed him clearly explaining his decisions. Mr. Bell produced signed documents, witness statements, and records of every meeting. The will stood. But the inheritance was only the beginning. The journals were the real weapon. Every night, I sat in my grandfather's study and read. Page after page. Year after year. His handwriting became shakier as time passed, but the details remained sharp. Bank transfers. False invoices. Land deals. Threatening letters. Names of people who had helped hide things. And then I found a folder labeled, Daniel, my father's name. Inside were copies of his notes. My father had kept records too. He had written down everything he discovered. The false companies. The accounts. The signatures. And at the bottom of one page was a line that made my blood turn cold. If anything happens to me, Martin knows why. I sat there staring at those words until the sun came up. If anything happens to me, Martin knows why. The official police report said my father's car lost control in the rain. But in my grandfather's files, there was another document. A mechanic's statement. The brake line had been tampered with. The mechanic had reported it privately. Then he had suddenly moved away. No follow-up. No investigation. No justice. I took everything to Mr. Bell. He read silently. When he finished, he removed his glasses. This is serious. Can we reopen the case? It will be difficult after so many years. Can we try? He looked at me for a long moment. Yes. So we tried. And that was when the family stopped pretending. One evening, I returned to the estate and found Victoria waiting outside the front door. She was wearing a white coat, her hair perfect, her lips painted red. She looked like she had come for a photo shoot, not a confrontation. You're making a mistake, she said. I unlocked the door. No, Victoria. I think I'm finally correcting one. She followed me inside. You don't understand what you're doing. If you drag up the past, people will suffer. I turned. People already suffered. She rolled her eyes. You mean your father? The way she said it made something inside me go still. Yes, I said. My father. She stepped closer. Our family survived because difficult decisions were made. I stared at her. Difficult decisions. You think your father was some saint? He was going to ruin everyone. He was going to expose theft. He was going to destroy us. No, Martin did that. Victoria's face hardened. You always were dramatic. And you always were cruel. She smiled. Cruel people survive. I looked at her for a long moment. No. Cruel people just mistake fear for respect. Her smile faded. What do you want, Clara? An apology. Money isn't enough for you. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I stepped closer. Try me. For a second, I thought she might say something real. But then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and turned away. Before leaving, she looked back and said, "Be careful in this house. Old places have accidents." The threat was quiet. Soft. Almost elegant. But it was a threat. That night, I changed the locks. The next morning, I installed cameras. 2 days later, someone broke into my grandfather's study. They didn't steal jewelry. They didn't take electronics. They went straight for the files. But they did not know I had already copied everything. The camera caught a man in a hood entering through the side door. His face was partly covered. But when he turned, the camera captured his wrist. A tattoo. Small black initials. A. Ethan Harrington. My cousin. When the police questioned him, he claimed he had only come to retrieve family belongings. At midnight. Wearing gloves. With a crowbar. The investigation into my father's death suddenly gained attention. Money can bury secrets. But scandal can dig them back up. Reporters began calling. Former employees came forward. One retired accountant admitted that Martin had forced him to approve false invoices. A driver said he remembered Martin arguing with my father 2 days before the accident. And then, the biggest break came from someone nobody expected. My mother. She came to the estate one rainy afternoon, holding a showbox. She looked exhausted, as if she had not slept in days. "I should have given you this years ago," she said. Inside were letters. My father's letters. He had written them during the final months of his life. Some were addressed to my mother. Some to my grandfather. And one to me. My hands shook when I saw my name. Clara. The envelope had never been opened. I looked at my mother. "You kept this from me?" She nodded, crying silently. "Why?" "Because I couldn't bear it." I wanted to scream at her. Instead, I opened the letter. "My little Clara, you are asleep as I write this. You have one hand under your cheek and your hair is sticking up in every direction. You told me today that butterflies are just flowers that learned how to fly. I hope you never stop seeing the world that way. If one day I am not here, I need you to know this. Leaving you would never be my choice. You are the best thing I have ever done. People may tell you things about me. They may say I was greedy or foolish or weak. Do not carry their lies. The truth is simple. I loved your mother. I loved you. And I tried to do the right thing. Doing the right thing can cost a person everything, but doing the wrong thing costs more. It costs the soul. Grow kind, but not soft. Grow strong, but not hard. And never let anyone convince you that love must be earned by silence. You were loved from the beginning. Dad, I broke. Not quietly. Not gracefully. I fell to the floor with that letter pressed to my chest and cried like the 8-year-old girl who had waited for her father to come home. My mother knelt beside me, but she did not touch me. Maybe she knew she had lost the right. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I looked at her through tears. "Sorry doesn't give him back." "No," she said. "It doesn't. Sorry doesn't give me my childhood back. No, sorry doesn't erase what you let them do." I know. And for the first time, my mother did not ask for forgiveness. She only sat there beside the daughter she had failed and let the truth punish her. Months passed. The legal fight became public. The Harrington name, once polished and untouchable, became a headline. Harrington heir reopens father's death case. Family fortune tied to decades-old fraud allegations. Granddaughter inherits empire. Exposes hidden scandal. People who had ignored me for years suddenly wanted interviews. Old classmates messaged me. Neighbors brought casseroles. Strangers sent letters saying my grandfather, had helped them pay hospital bills or saved their businesses during hard times. That was the strange thing about him. He had done good things. He had also done cowardly things. He was not a villain. He was not a saint. He was human. And loving someone human means grieving not only who they were, but who they failed to be. One morning, Mr. Bell called me. "They've found the mechanic." My breath stopped. "The one who inspected my father's car?" "Yes." "Where is he?" "Arizona." "He's alive." "And Clara, what?" "He's willing to testify." His name was Paul Reyes. He was 74, with tired eyes and hands that shook when he held a coffee cup. We met in a small conference room with lawyers present. He looked at me and immediately started crying. "I knew your father," he said. "Good man. Kind man." I could barely speak. "What happened?" He rubbed his face. "I checked the car after the crash. Brake line was cut. Not worn. Cut. Clean. I reported it to a man from your family." "Who?" He looked down. "Martin Harrington." The room went cold. He told me I was mistaken. Then he offered me money to leave town. Said if I didn't, my own kids might have accidents too. My hands clenched. "So you left?" He nodded, ashamed. I was a coward. I thought I would hate him. But looking at this old man, broken by guilt, I realized cowardice had many faces in my family's story. Some wore expensive suits. Some wore grief. Some wore silence. "What made you come forward now?" I asked. He looked at me. "Your grandfather wrote to me before he died. Said the girl deserved the truth." "The girl?" "Me?" Even near the end, my grandfather had been trying to repair what he had broken. Paul's testimony changed everything. Martin was questioned again. His old accounts were reopened. Records connected him to payments made after my father's death. Not enough at first, but enough to make him sweat. And when guilty men sweat, they make mistakes. Martin's mistake was trusting Patricia. Aunt Patricia had always been loyal to money first. When investigators began looking into assets, she turned on him faster than anyone expected. She gave them documents, emails, old statements, and one recording. A recording from years ago. On it, Martin's voice could be heard saying, "Daniel should have stayed quiet. I warned him." It wasn't a full confession. But it was enough. Enough to charge him with financial crimes. Enough to reopen the death investigation fully. Enough for the family to stop calling me dramatic. The day Martin was arrested, I watched from the courthouse steps. He saw me as officers led him to a car. For a second, he looked like the same man who once told me my father was nobody. Then his face collapsed into rage. "You think you won," he shouted. I looked at him. "No," I said. "I think my father finally got heard." He spat something ugly. The officers pushed him into the car. And just like that, the man who had terrified everyone in my family disappeared behind a closing door. Justice was not instant. It was slow. Messy. Imperfect. Some charges stuck. Some didn't. The case around my father's death was harder to prove than the fraud. Too many years had passed. Too much evidence had been buried. But the truth came out. Not all of it in court. Some of it came out in whispers. Some in testimony. Some in old letters. Some in the way people could no longer look me in the eye. Martin eventually accepted a deal on the financial crimes. The investigation into my father's death remained open longer, but the public truth was clear enough. My father had not been a greedy outsider. He had been a threat to corrupt people. And I had spent my life paying for his courage. After everything, the estate felt different. Not lighter exactly. A house that has held secrets for generations does not become innocent overnight. But it became honest. I removed the portraits from the hallway. Not all of them. Just the ones who had been worshipped for the wrong reasons. In their place, I hung photographs. My grandfather planting roses. My grandmother laughing in the garden. My father holding me as a baby. And one empty frame. People asked why I left it empty. I told them it was for the future. The Harrington Company changed too. I had no interest in being a figurehead while old men in suits ran things the old way. So I learned. Every morning, I sat with advisors. Every afternoon, I visited departments. I read contracts until my eyes hurt. I asked questions even when people looked annoyed. Especially then. Some employees expected me to fail. Some hoped I would. But others helped me. A woman named Marisol, who had worked in accounting for 30 years, told me quietly, "Your father was the only man who treated clerks like people." After that, she became one of my closest advisors. We audited everything. We closed the false vendor accounts. We created a fund for employees harmed by past corruption. We sold properties used only as tax shelters, and invested in the town my grandfather had both built and controlled. People called it bold. Some called it foolish. I called it cleaning the house. Victoria tried to start her own campaign against me. She gave interviews about being erased from her legacy. She wore black and spoke softly about family betrayal. But the public had seen enough. When reporters asked why she had never spoken kindly of me before the inheritance, she had no answer. Ethan moved away. Patricia divorced Martin before the trial ended and attempted to present herself as another victim. Maybe in some ways she was. But she had also been a willing architect of pain. I did not hate them forever. Hate is heavy. And I had carried enough weight. But I did not invite them back into my life. Forgiveness, I learned, does not mean reopening the door. Sometimes forgiveness means locking it without anger. My mother was different. That was harder. She stayed in town. At first, I refused to see her. Then, one Sunday, I found her standing at the edge of the rose garden. She was holding gardening gloves. "Your grandfather said these roses were your favorite," she said. I almost walked away. But something stopped me. Maybe the little girl in me. Maybe the woman I was becoming. "They are," I said. She nodded. "I don't expect anything from you, Clara. I just wondered if I could help." I looked at her hands. Soft hands. Hands that had never fought for me. Now they were shaking. "Roses have thorns," I said. "I know. They'll cut you if you're careless." "I know." I handed her a pair of pruning shears. We worked in silence for an hour. It did not fix us. One afternoon in a garden cannot repair 20 years of absence. But it was a beginning. A small one. The kind that does not announce itself. Over time, my mother told me more about my father. How he sang badly while cooking. How he proposed to her with a cheap ring, because it was all he could afford. How he cried the first time he held me. Each story hurt. Each story healed. I never fully understood why she had chosen fear over love. Maybe I never will. But I learned that understanding someone's weakness does not require excusing the damage they caused. Years later, on the anniversary of my grandfather's funeral, I stood in the same church. This time, it was not for a funeral. It was for a dedication. We had restored the old community center and named it after my father. The Daniel Reed Center for Youth and Family Advocacy. Yes. Reed. Not Harrington. My father's name. The center offered legal aid, counseling, scholarships, and emergency housing for families who had been silenced by money, fear, or abuse. When I stepped to the podium, the church was full again. But this time, people were not there for scandal. They were there for something better. My mother sat in the third row. Mr. Bell sat beside her, older now, smiling softly. Marisol sat with employees from the company. The pastor nodded at me. I unfolded my speech. For a moment, I saw myself years earlier, sitting in the last pew at my grandfather's funeral, thinking I did not belong. I looked at the audience and began. When I was a child, I believed silence was the price of being loved. The room was quiet. I believed that if I was patient enough, useful enough, invisible enough, one day my family would choose me. My voice trembled, but I continued. Then I learned something painful. Love that requires your silence is not love. It is control. My mother lowered her head. But I also learned that truth can survive longer than lies. It can be buried, mocked, delayed, and denied. But truth has roots. And when the season comes, it breaks through concrete. I looked toward the photograph of my father near the stage. My father tried to do the right thing, and it cost him everything. For many years, his name was stained by people who feared his honesty. Today, we give his name back to the world. People stood. Applause filled the church. And for the first time, when I heard my father's name, it did not feel like a wound. It felt like a seed. After the ceremony, Mr. Bell approached me. Your grandfather would be proud, he said. I smiled sadly. He would also argue with half my decisions. Mr. Bell laughed. Yes. He absolutely would. Then he handed me a small envelope. What is this? I was instructed to give this to you only after you did something with the inheritance that was entirely your own. I stared at him. Another letter. The last one. My hands shook as I opened it. Clara, if Richard has given you this, then you have done what I hoped. Not what I ordered. Not what I planned. What you chose. That matters. For much of my life, I confused control with protection. I thought if I held everything tightly enough, I could keep the family name clean. Instead, I preserved rot. You have done what I could not. You opened the windows. You let the light in. I am sorry for every year my silence cost you. I am sorry for failing your father. I am sorry for loving you quietly when you deserved to be loved loudly. But I hope, somehow, you felt it. I hope you knew that every book I gave you, every rose we planted, every story on the porch, was my clumsy way of saying what pride and shame kept trapped in my mouth. You were never small, Clara. They only kept you in small rooms. Now build bigger ones. Grandfather, I read the last line again and again. Now build bigger ones. That evening, I went back to the estate alone. The sunset had turned the windows gold. For years, I had thought of that house as a prison. Then as a battlefield. Now, for the first time, it felt like a place waiting to become something new. I walked to the study. My grandfather's chair was still behind the desk. For a long time, I had avoided sitting in it. It felt too large. Too heavy. Too full of ghosts. But that night, I sat down. The leather creaked softly. On the desk were 2 photographs. My grandfather. My father. Both men flawed by the world in different ways. Both part of me. I placed my hand over my father's letter. You were loved from the beginning. For most of my life, I had wanted someone to stand in front of my family and say I mattered. At the funeral, the lawyer had pointed at me, and everyone went silent. Back then, I thought the silence meant shock. Then I thought it meant fear. Now I understand what it really was. It was the sound of a lie dying. My family had spent years telling a story where I was the extra person. The unwanted child. The quiet girl in the back. The one who should be grateful for scraps. But my grandfather's final act changed the ending. Not because he gave me money. Money did not heal me. Power did not heal me. Even justice did not heal me completely. What healed me was learning the truth. That my father loved me. That his courage lived in me. That my grandfather, despite all his failures, saw me. And that I did not need the people who broke me to be the ones who named my worth. I named it myself. A year after the funeral, we opened the Harrington Estate Gardens to the public. Not the house. Not yet. The gardens. Especially the roses. Children ran along the stone paths. Old women sat on benches. Couples took photographs beneath the archway. And near the center, beside the white roses, I placed a small plaque. It read, "For Arthur, who planted. For Daniel, who told the truth. For Clara, who remembered." People often ask me if I ever regret what happened. That is a strange question. I regret the pain. I regret the years lost. I regret that my father never saw me grow up. I regret that my grandfather waited until death to speak. But I do not regret the day of the funeral. Because that was the day my life split in two. Before that day, I was surviving inside a story written by people who wanted me powerless. After that day, I began writing my own. And if you are listening to this, maybe you know what it feels like to be underestimated. Maybe you have sat in the back row of your own life, while others decided who you were allowed to be. Maybe you have been told to stay quiet for the sake of family, reputation, peace, or tradition. But let me tell you what my grandfather told me long ago, before I understood. People show you who they are when they think you have no power. So watch. Remember. And when the day comes, stand. Because sometimes the person everyone ignores is the one carrying the truth. Sometimes the weakest person in the room is only waiting for the right moment. And sometimes, at a funeral, when a lawyer points across a silent room, the forgotten one becomes the heir. The accused becomes the witness. The quiet one becomes the storm. And the family that buried the truth realizes too late. The grave was never deep enough.